Today we'll be talking about Anthony Mitchell and police brutality. I'm Rugburn.
And I'm Pickled Landon.
And this is Tombstone Tourist. So today we have a rather odd case. We're going over police brutality, and I feel like that's very common, right? So we have police that kind of beat up people. We have police that just shoot unarmed people. We have police that do all kinds of flagrant stuff. Well, this time they take it to kind of a whole new level. It ends with a man in a freezer, but there's some stuff leading up to that and how he got arrested. You kind of want to explain?
Yeah, so he's being checked up on by his cousin Steve, Anthony is. And when Steve gets there, Anthony's saying really weird, off-the-wall, illogical things that just don't make sense, like talking about portals to heaven and hell in his dad's house and finding his baby brother that died when he was really young and putting him through one of those portals. He's making no sense. At first, he lets into it a little bit, but eventually he realizes he needs to get him help, and he calls 911 out of desperation. The police come to do a welfare check, and when they show up, Anthony comes out and he brandishes a weapon and fires off a shot, and then he runs into the woods.
It's worth mentioning, too, he doesn't hit police, right? He just kind of fires a shot.
They don't mention where the shot went, but they don't bring up anybody getting shot or hurt or anything. He just discharges it, and then he runs off into the woods, and they arrest him.
The family was they were probably just entertaining him a little bit, right? Like trying to help out the obviously mentally ill cousin who's been dealing with drug addiction and meth abuse for most of his adult life. And they were like, yeah, sure, we could look for it. And then eventually he's like, let's look for him in the walls.
Because he did have a baby brother that died in infancy, like a stillborn or some situation. But he's under the assumption that it's in a box somewhere in his old family home. But when he can't find it, like you said, they play into it a little bit to kind of hopefully give him some relief.
Yeah.
Without having this escalate to like, hey, we have to have you committed. But when it starts to escalate and he's like, we need to tear down the interior walls to find it, and he's a 6'3" man, he's not very little. So I think they saw that he was possibly going to become a danger to himself or others. And they did what they thought was right. Nothing on the family. They were trying to help.
And he was probably acting a little erratic too, you can imagine. I mean, that whole concept sounds wild. And I mean, they were trying to, it seems like, help clear his mind, at least to begin with. So, I mean, how were they supposed to predict the cops were going to, do what they did? But anyways, we have a video that kind of shows the aftermath a little bit of the abuse that took place. Just a little preview of it. They ended up, for punishment, because they didn't know how to handle his kind of mental illness and kind of off-the-wall behavior, they ended up putting him in a walk-in in the jail and just left him there naked. Two very cruel and unusual punishments right there. But anyways, let's go to the video, and it kind of speaks for itself. And it's worth noting here, too, that they did say that he was conscious when they decided to get him medical attention. And if you can look right here, he's not looking very conscious, in my opinion.
Yeah, they also bring up he was 72 degrees Fahrenheit when they did a rectal thermometer check. He's not very close to life in general.
As we saw there, we don't really have any video of him inside the freezer itself, just him being carried out. As you can see, he was rather lifeless, not moving. Like Pickled Landon had said, he had an internal temperature of 72 degrees, which is way below what you need to be at to be in any kind of healthy shape. The levels of corruption that had to have taken place in order for this to have happened, because not only did someone have to put him in there, naked, might I add, other correctional officers had to see this take place and not speak up, which in my opinion makes you just as guilty and liable for anything that takes place.
In the lawsuit that the family's filing, they bring up pictures, and you can see images of the correctional officers laughing, even with the nursing staff. And it's really heartbreaking. It was a correctional officer that ended up kind of leaking the footage and making this known. But it was after the 14 days had already occurred. Man has already suffered and passed away from his injuries. They left him in a freezer for 6 hours. I don't really know how people can do that without feeling something, but it does seem like they were not enjoying it, but they were taking some kind of like pride in the way that they were treating him because he was having mental health issues, and this is how they were dealing with it, was like with violence and restraining him and dragging him around naked. And I don't know, I just feel like they should have handled it a little differently.
It's a definite abuse of power, and something else to note too, why I think the facility needs to be held accountable, is they even got a health specialist, like kind of on-site nurse, to kind of go in there and look. She apparently looked for roughly about 2 minutes and decided to not call an ambulance or any kind of further medical attention brought to him. It wasn't until like near the end of him being in that freezer too where they decided to give him just a jumpsuit, which it's not like it's a jacket or anything like that. It's a thin layer of clothing that's getting thrown on him, so it's not making a huge difference. I definitely think that this family has a really good chance at winning the lawsuit, and I think they should get as much as possible for this, honestly. Like, being mentally ill is no cause for forcing someone to freeze to death.
Even the way they handled it with the family, the cousin, Steve, he's the one that called the police in the first place. They call him when they brought him down to the hospital because they couldn't control his temperature. His temperature just started dropping. Like we brought up, at 72 degrees, and that was rectal. That's like the core of your body. He'd been in there for a minute, long enough to get him hurt. And they bring in Steve and they said, oh man, we've had a hard time with Anthony, complaining about what they were going through when they've just led to this man's death. And he also makes it clear that the department knew that he was dying, that he wasn't aware in that conversation. Like, he tells the dude straight up at the hospital, he's like, oh yeah, we've had a hard time, we don't know what's wrong with him. But then went to the public and said he was alert and awake. They said that they had to resuscitate, like they attempted to resuscitate him and were never able to achieve it.
All in all, I do believe all correctional officers involved need to go ahead and be charged legally. And then, I mean, I really think they need to pay out of their own pocket some of this money for the lawsuit. But we all know that it's just taxpayers who are going to end up suffering for that, and it probably won't. But I would like to at least see some legal justice come to these people for what they did. That's just my take on it. I'm pretty tired of all the police corruption that goes on.
It seems like it's every week, and it's always against minorities or people that have mental health issues or people that are not able to defend themselves in ways that, you know, maybe money and other resources might help you out. It's always those members of society that suffer the most from the people that are supposed to protect them. And I don't know, to just watch police torture a mentally ill man for 2 weeks until he died, is the thought of it doesn't sound very safe. You know, it makes you really question their integrity
and their morals and everything. Yeah, 100%. Anything else you want to put on this one, or you want to just wrap a bow on it?
Just wrap a bow on it.
Let us know what you think down in the comments below. What do you think about police brutality? Do you think it's a pandemic? Do you think it's just one-offs? Do you think that more officers need to be held accountable and speak up against these bad apples? Are the ones that don't speak up just as bad? Let us know. Like and subscribe. We appreciate y'all. I'm Rugburn.
And I'm Pickled Landon.
And this is Tombstone Tourist.